One quote that stands out to me from Mayor Riley: whatever income strata you are or education level, you still are nourished by something that you feel looks nice. And that's what great cities in the world have always done. Always cared about their built environment. Charleston's a better city because of Mayor Riley. We can learn a lot from him, and I'm glad he's here. Mayor Joe Colley.
Well, thank you very much, Jim, Mr. Mayor, and ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honor to be with all of you, and I thank and congratulate those who are responsible for putting this meeting together. This will be a model for our country of regional leaders, elected officials and mayors and council members and county execs and designers and professionals and neighborhood and community leaders coming together to talk about their community and their region. We all know, obviously you wouldn't be here if you didn't believe in it, that we live in a region. We function in a region. We serve in a region. We are a nation in America of regions. So I thank you for this model for our country, this meeting, and for your service, and it's an honor to be with you today. I will speak about some of our efforts in Charleston, and these, I believe, are transferable principles. The scale doesn't matter. A little city, a medium-sized city, a large city, a community, all part of a region. The principles are all the same. Charleston is an old American city. It was built and laid out in the late 1600s, built before the automobile and the elevator. A city of remarkable beauty and special architectural features, marvelous human scale. It's a city where the preservation movement in America began, much to ours and our country's betterment. But nothing is preordained and nothing is guaranteed. We all have to be alert to opportunities of success and mistakes that can be real failures. This was a great mistake. It was a demolition of the historic Charleston Hotel where the National Democratic Convention of 1860 met. But it was demolished in the 50s because city leaders were confident to be a great city, you had to have a drive-in motel. I mean, no, I'm a great city without a drive-in motel. Well, obviously, that was a huge mistake, and this business that we're in is to try our best not to make mistakes. The renourishment of a city must be a holistic one, and we started in the poor sections of our city with the challenge of vacant lots, which many cities have lots of those. Wanted to put affordable housing on those vacant lots. This is what houses look like in those neighborhoods. They were framed, they addressed the sidewalk. But in the 50s and 60s, in building affordable housing, maybe perhaps obligatorily, this is what was designed. It bore no relationship to the neighborhood, just kind of sandwiched in. And usually they'd put a cyclone fence around it just to warn you that it was not safe to live there. No one should really want to live there to begin with. So we were determined to prove that we could build handsome, affordable housing. So we picked a young architect, and he designed this, which back in the late 70s took a lot of guts because it did look like something that you'd seen before. It blended in with the neighborhood, so we had that wonderful success when the Housing Authority got a grant, the new public housing project. And so they came to me and said, Mayor, we got it, 170 units, project so-and-so, and know where to put it. And I said, well, we're not building any more projects. And they said, well, you're crazy. The people, we're on a waiting list. You're going to be impeached. This would be terrible. And I said, no, we're going to build a public housing. We're not going to do this anymore. Not going to do this anymore. They ignored all the accumulated lessons of Western civilization about how to build neighborhood and connect with people. And we're not going to do that. We're going to scatter the public housing on vacant lots in our city. So they reluctantly agreed. They didn't have any choice. And then we started the interesting discussion in the community of picking what vacant lots get for public housing. You know, the average citizen doesn't wake up in the morning and turn to the spouse and say, honey, wouldn't it be good if we could get some of that public housing next door? So we had some, interesting discussions in the neighborhoods, but we worked out that and picked the sites, and then we picked the architect, and they came up with their plans, ugly as sin. We fired those architects, got some other architects, and this is what they designed. That's public housing, heavily subsidized, really poor people live there, but it fit in with the neighborhood. When Prince Charles came to Charleston, the only photo op he wanted was in front of a public housing, Scottsdale public housing, because he thought it was an example that the world could be given about Charleston. When I was at a cocktail party at one of our college's homes one evening, and just a crush of people, and the servers come in with the tray of food and drinks, weaving through, and one of the servers approached me, and she said, Mayor Riley, I want to thank you. And I said, what's that for, man? And she said, because Monday I'm moving into 7 Marion Street. That was one of these, and it's so beautiful. Now, this is a long time before Hope 6, and it's all back then American News projects, and I thought maybe with just a few syllables, the prospective tenant of public housing had not used the word beautiful before. And the fact of the matter is, in this business that we're in, there's never any excuse to build anything, to allow anything to be built that doesn't add to the beauty of the neighborhood. This building, 2 apartments, became a catalyst. Across the street, these were run down, private sector went in to restore them. Around the corner was a vacant lot. Next door, market rate housing went in there. Around the corner, market rate housing went in, catalyzed by one building, really poor people living there, very good urban design, gave hope and opportunity for the neighborhood. We worked to keep the bulldozers out. It's so hard to do. These things look so terrible, and to spend the money to fix them up, we used various sources of money, created nonprofits, and just did everything we could to not let one be taken down. And the reason that is so important is that this isn't an old country, and every time we lose a piece of the fabric, texture, memory of the past, we've lost something forever. So we worked hard in these neighborhoods to keep everything we could to get these restored. These were all affordable housing initiatives, and we kept them so that now, with the market forces turning and people moving back into the city, we've got neighborhoods that have some sense of scale and history that would have been forever lost. We created nonprofits. The nonprofit we worked with took that house, been burned, and restored it for affordable housing. And then these were freedmen's cottages. They were one story of what we call Charleston single house. That was what African Americans built after the Civil War, when they could legally own land. But they were in desperate shape, and then Hurricane Hugo at '89 came through and about knocked them all down. But we knew we should keep them, so we worked with Habitat. It was the first rehab project Habitat had ever done in America, and restored them, and it saved the neighborhood, but it also showed us the building type. We had created a wonderful shelter for the homeless, terrific, one of my greatest sources of pride. And so working on transitional housing, someone's been in the shelter, gotten on their feet a little bit, and got a few bucks to pay to rent something, and so moved into transitional housing. We didn't know what to design, so picked a young architect that was inspired by this. He designed that and won an award from the AIA. Transitional public housing. Scottsdale public housing won an award from the President of the United States, President Reagan. Things that so often, you just wouldn't have thought to worry about how they look. But the fact is that whatever, if a human being can see it in a town or city, if they can see it, then it will affect them, and it should be built with beauty and care. We worked on our corner lots. This was a house admittedly in not very good condition, and the building official called me one day and said, Mayor, I just want to let you know we're letting the demolition permit for this 104 Fishman Street, whatever it was, come down. I said, no, we're not. And he said, Mayor, the house is shifting, and it's true, the utility pole was vertical, and he said it's going to fall on the house next door and kill the people. And I said, well, let's move the people out for a couple of months. So we moved them out, put them in the Howard Johnson. The kids loved it. They had a swimming pool. It was the summer. And we got some money in there. You know, it looked like hell. And but it was a corner lot. And fixed it up for affordable housing. And you know, the corners, you lose the corner because of decay. And then that virus spreads. And the next one catches, and then the next one. So this is a wonderful story about this building. We had another iteration that got it further restored, and the whole neighborhood now, it's just all income levels living there, but keeping that corner. These were owned by the Medical University. They needed to move them, which they did. So they wanted to tear them down. Wouldn't let them, so we got to move them to the stepped-out corner and restored them to affordable housing. And it was a little street that I'd never studied because the street had been severed by a crosstown built in the early 60s, and kind of couldn't easily get there. But we did those that you can see, it looks so nice. And then looking down the street from the balcony closest to you was this tree growing out of the sidewalk in the street, which I admired. Just the guts of the tree is still growing out of the sidewalk in the street, and the fact that no one had noticed it and they hadn't cut it down. And so, but under this really cool tree was this gosh awful looking place, and so I said we need to buy it. We got up people praising it, and the building official called me and said, hey, you want to buy 59 Cracker Street? I said, Jay said, Mayor, it cannot be saved. And I said, let's take a look at it. He said, Mayor, it will fall on us and kill us. Really. And it's true that the utility meter they couldn't remove it because it was structural. It would pull the whole thing down. We put some money in it, restored it as affordable housing. When we had the ribbon cutting on that, a lady came up to me. She said, Mayor, I want to thank you. And I said, what's that for, ma'am? She said, because it used to be that when people asked where I lived, I was embarrassed to tell them. And now, because Cracky Street looks so bad, and I can't wait for people to ask me because everybody knows how nice Cracky Street is. Big challenge of towns and cities has been our Main Street. It was in one iteration, which was in my lifetime, it was a heartthrob of activity. If it was a small town, it was bustling Saturday when everybody came to town, or bigger cities all time, every week of the week, every month, every day of the week, people would be coming there, and it had the energy, and they were dying. And so we knew we had to restore them. And, you know, so often as we go about this, and we're still going about this, you got to sell it. And it's not easy to sell sometimes. Buy all that money on Main Street, whatever. And but the reason you have to do it is, and what you tell the public, of course, is the jobs and the tax base and all of that. But the reason is that it's the public realm. It's what great little teeny cities or big cities forever have recognized is that it's the public space. If it's dead, you've lost something. If it's lively, then the eye contact, the elbow contact, the sense of shared citizenship, the civicness of it, the bustle and hustle and all of that makes a community so much better. So we worked hard. We did it by the numbers. My Main Street, King Street, was about dead. We did studies of what the buildings used to look like, and we put some money into buildings to get apartments on the second, third floor to get 24 activity, and fixed up the first floor. And buildings like this, a Swartz building, you know, pretty miserable looking, and got it restored, looked terrific. Harkin Hugo knocked it down. But we had enough going that got another one a little bit bigger and better put in there. But this was our big challenge. Main Street, the dogleg street that you're looking at was King Street, the Main Street. And when I was a child, there were 2 department stores where that vacant lot is. And then intersecting was Market Street. So to your right, you see some red roofs, and that was once the public market. And that had you know, kind of a bad image. Market Street had. It was someone said it's one of the few places in America that for 50 cents you can get a bowl of chili, a tattoo, or communicable disease on Market Street. So Market Street started coming back a little bit, and so we needed to connect Market Street to King Street. But people do not walk past a vacant lot in an urban setting, because it's just telling you this isn't good and you don't like being there. So we had to put a lot of energy into that vacant lot. And it had to be just right. Had no room for mistake, because we were restoring a dying ecosystem. And if the wrong restorative agent or the wrong operation occurs, then the patient becomes more ill and it could be fatal. So we knew we had to respect the scale of the buildings. They couldn't be overwhelming on the street. We had to protect the old Market Hall building that's like Faneuil Hall, and move the street back a few feet. We insisted on retail, low rise along the street, and we got it built. It took a long time and a lot of money, and very controversial. People were afraid of overrunning the city. And so we got it built. And then the details in this business are so important. In city, town building, just like any other profession or work, the details are so important. The success between a great business or a great project and not so much. So two interesting details on this. One is the conference facility, which is the upper left, you can see. And that's a normal hotel. You got the conference facility. And then the pre-assembly space where you have a cup of coffee or something to eat before the meeting, they wanted to be in the middle of the building. So you come down the elevator, you see obviously where the elevators would be, and peel off to the right, and pre-assembly space would be overlooking the church and the graveyard. And so they showed that to me, and then I said, well, where would the kitchen area be? And they said, well, that would be out, along the street side on the second floor, which meant there would be no windows or phony windows. And I said, no, you don't do that in cities. You build a building on the street, the building should connect to the street and be proud to be on the street. And so you've got to move the pre-assembly space to the street. And so they didn't want to do it, but they were good people and they agreed to do it. So rather than phony windows, we got this looking out over the street, which is really nice, you know where you are. And then on the street you look up and you see the civic action. So the building connects, as buildings used to do in cities, connects with the street. Whether you're going in there or not, you see the action. That one redevelopment, ecosystem enhancement transformed our downtown. And 50, 75 buildings got restored because of it. And one Sunday, I was walking up this street, King Street, above where these gals are, after church to buy New York Times, and I passed a fellow walking there who I knew. He was out of place. He was retired, he was married, lived in the suburbs, noon on Sunday, walking by himself down the street. It made me nervous, like something had happened. And as we passed each other, I said, Hal, how you doing? He said, fine. I said, what are you doing down here and now? And he said, well, Joe, and then he kind of started getting a little flushed, like I'd caught him, and he might have to reveal an emotion, which we guys, of course, never want to do. And he said, well, Joe, Doris and I went to early church, and she had some chores to do around the house, and he said, Joe, I just like to come down here and park my car and walk around because it looks so nice, and I'm so proud of it. And that's why we do all this work that's so hard, is because in the final analysis, it gives our citizens a sense of pride of something that they own, which is the public realm in this city. Then right near this development was this, where this office building is, was a vacant, well, not a vacant lot, it was a one-story gas station that was closed. And so that wasn't very nice. And then above it was a giant billboard, right in the middle of downtown. And the giant billboard said, if you like Charleston, you will love Savannah. Right in the middle. Make you mad as hell. And so anything to get rid of that billboard, I was all for it. And so these guys came in, they wanted to build the office building, and they needed to buy some land from the city right behind it. And I said, that's fine. We'll get it appraised, take it to the real estate committee. But I said, we need some shops along Market Street. And they said, no, Joe, our people don't want mixed use. It's just an office building. I said, well, we'll save the land. They said, well, we can't do this. We'll lose our shirt. I said, well, I don't want you to lose shirt, but we need shops along the street. William H. Hollyway, he studied how people use cities in the 60s, and he said that Upper Madison Avenue, New York, was doing pretty well then when downtown wasn't, because every 22 feet was another storefront. In a city, you move along a street when there's something to see and keep you moving, and draperies or blank walls don't do it. So they reluctantly agreed. Later said it's the best idea they had, because they made much more money for the little shops than they would the drapery. And so you got something like that. And these people were having a perfectly good time until I took their picture. They wondered what the hell I do. But they were looking at the jury, moving down. Isn't that pretty? Then you go down to the next thing, you keep moving down the street. And then right at the next corner, we get Saks Avenue to come. Well, that was a really big deal for us. And there was a nothing one-story building there. So we had a nice building built and had really nice storefronts. Boy, they were terrific. And then right along this intersecting street, Market Street, and then we had the theater that was closed, of course, and we did a deal with the developer, and he agreed to fix it up. And so what I did there, I'm not sure. But anyway, right alongside the theater was this wall, and and then on the other side, across from it was Saks with all these great storefronts. So I said, while y'all fixing up the theater, they will shrink the volume of space and be able to put something on there. I said, can we get some storefronts? And they said, well, Joe, you got a narrow sidewalk, and so, best we can do is just punch some holes in like that. And I said, well, that doesn't work. It's shady and collects trash. I said, what would need for you to be able to put some storefronts? He said, well, you have to widen the sidewalk. I said, well, that's no problem. So I sent a note to our people, said, we need to widen the sidewalk on Market Street. And they politely sent me a message back and told me that we couldn't, because if you widen the sidewalk, you would have to reduce the width of the street. And I told them that I'd studied math at the Citadel, and I'd already figured that out, even before I told them. And so I said, what's wrong with narrowing the street? And they said, well, it's just, I said, what do you got now? I got two 11-foot lanes. I said, what about two 9-foot lanes? So they did the diagram to show me why it was impossible, and that was if you had two 9-foot lanes and a beer delivery truck was illegally parked in one lane. Then the Greyhound bus tried to pass it, which Greyhound buses didn't come downtown anymore, but let's say they wanted to, and they tried to pass it, then the rearview mirrors would hit. And I said, what if we don't let the beer truck illegally park, and I like beer, and what if we, So anyway, we widened the sidewalk, just 2 feet on each side. This isn't a very good picture, but you now have the street lamp, and you got the tree right down from it. But that extra 2 feet was, created a whole new space. And so often as we wrestle with the challenge of our cities and so many different things, we first thing is watery like that, kind of like the problem of a beer truck, when really the question is, how does a human being feel? How does a mother feel walking down that street holding the child's hand? Does it feel safe? Does it feel welcome? Does it feel nice? Then we had this awful fire. Oh my gosh, it was the middle of the night, of course. I went out there, and how the firefighters contained it to one building, I do not know. Their courage and ability is amazing. And so they saved it, just saved the whole block. That's what it looked like next morning. Well, the building official called me and said, Mayor, we got to let the Bluestein building come down, the Bluestein building. And I said, no, we don't. He said, Mayor, we were there early this morning now, and we've examined the engineering capacity of the building, and the mortar bonding capacity is demolished, is gone, and the building will crumble and fall into the street and kill people. And I said, well, we can barricade the street off, So anyway, it's a long story. The city acquired the facade rights from the developer, owner, family whose ancestors emigrated from Eastern Europe and built the building, and wonderful building, and so we agreed to put money in it, restored it. The city leased the top 2 floors because it said nobody would want to lease it. Later, of course, the market forces drove the private sector in there, but that one corner building, if we had lost that, and this part of our Main Street is really thriving now, but if we had lost that, and I said, well, that virus would have spread, and this wonderful memory of what the city was once when a second generation Jewish family comes and builds a building. You lose all that. So anyway, we got it restored, and the King Street's been transformed. Then parking is such a challenge, and we needed this parking garage. There was nothing there, of course, and obviously the parking garage got built. But I told the architect we picked, I said, now I want us a parking garage that doesn't look like one. This was in the 80s. And he said, very courteously, he said, Mayor, you do not understand. An architecture form follows function, and the building should look like what it is and does. And I said, no, I heard about all that, but we're not going to do that at this particular location in Charleston. And because that had been, I thought, a real problem in America, that you just, you put these very mechanical-looking things, plop them in a main street, and anyway. So he didn't want to give me this. He relented that he would give me, I said on some louvers, he would give me a little bit of louver from the top, but you had to see the car. It's like there's no fun designing a parking garage you can't see the car. His manhood would be questioned. So anyway, I got a police photographer to take pictures of buildings around town with closed shutters. We got it designed. It won an award. It won an award from National Endowment of the Arts. They don't give awards for buildings. And but the chairman of the endowment came down to present the award to us. We had a ceremony, and I thought he had been briefed by his staff, And so we had lunch before the award ceremony. It was going to be in front of the building, and so we had walked past the building to the restaurant. He said, by the way, Joe, when we come near that building, point it out to me. And I said, Frank, you just walk by. That was the whole purpose. And we got law firms and other things on the first floor. It's really nice. And then the other small detail in the big Charleston Place development was we needed parking, a big parking facility, and we had these buildings on the street, the other street it was on, Meeting Street, that were in desperate shape, and they were seedy and junky. Even had a striptease joint in one of them. But we agreed that we could just give it, keep the first 50 feet of the building, and we acquire the rest for the parking garage, and we buy the whole piece. They ran very deeply into the lot, and so we bought some of them, which meant that the city owned the building where the striptease joint was. So because they had a lease for a while. So, which would create a very interesting thing, and the male members of the city's legal department insisted that they had to inspect that place every night to make sure everything was okay. So anyway, eventually they got restored, and it's bustling. This time of day, there'd be people lining up to go in the restaurants. But I took this right after the open because those two people are in charge of that space. And if it had been some industrial building or a big porte-cochere and all of that, then they wouldn't be stopping and looking. They wouldn't be in charge. Then we put the parking behind it, and we put gardens and parking garages and trees and flowers and everything to soften the edge and to make it more beautiful. Then the city was built on the water, and so in the previous centuries, closest to you in the 1800s, and then in the turn of the 1800s, early 1900s, on the bottom, they gave the public access to water to the public. So we had our shot at this when the land that you see was going to become the Venice of the Southeast. Terminals had been, they were burned out in the 50s and just languished, rotted, burned, charred pilings and all of that. And developers will put the Venice of the Southeast. And this was in the mid-70s. I mean, the city really needed the tax base and all of that. But we knew that that's not what a great city would do. And so we told the developer that with all due respect that we wanted a park and not the Venice of the Southeast. And he said with all due respect he wanted to go ahead and do his Venice of the Southeast. So we threatened to acquire it by eminent domain, which he really didn't like. And he said that he accused me of being a Hitler-like dictator and all that. But we worked it out, did a land swap and everything. And we had the deed signing ceremony a couple years later, and had a party and everybody had a couple of drinks. The developer came up and told everybody that I reminded him of Winston Churchill. And I told him that was so much better than the character that he had referred to a little while ago anyway. But we knew that's what cities do. You give the edge to the public. And so we also know you don't plop things in a city. So we studied how it used to be. So what would be organic? And then got great designers and designed a wonderful park. And that's what it looked like before construction began. And and people, we all know this, but you're always selling. You've got to communicate. You communicate, you're not, selling a goods, you're selling the heart. What you're doing is, in the work we do, your goal is to do something that will make people's hearts sing when it is done, that they will rejoice in it. So people said, why do we need a park? Park costs money, property off the tax book. Where do people go to parks and all that kind of stuff? And but we built it, and then, when it opened, it was gorgeous, beautiful night when we had the wonderful opening ceremony, and the community absolutely loves the park. Kids love playing in the water, and people love walking their dogs. When you design a park, and Ellen and others, this, that the first challenge is to understand its purpose. That plays in that city. It's hard work. Not plop something down and said, it was what in this town, this place in our town, what is the purpose of this park? What should it do? So we decided that in that place for our city, it needed to be a place of peace and repose. So we don't have events, don't have retail, it's just a beautiful space, and for people to relax and enjoy, and they do. And once after the park, I've been open a couple of years, I was down there, and a lady came up to me, which speaks to the purpose of your conference, and she said, Mayor Riley, I'm from Hanahan. That was a city about 15, 18 miles away from downtown, and in another county. And she said, I'm from Hanahan, and I want you to know we love your park. And I said, oh, thank you so much. But I want you to know this is your park. It belongs to you. And that's the thing about regionalism is that we're doing it for others. Nothing is for just us. It's for the region and it's for the cities, and that's what great towns and cities do. You create amenities, or you create assets that are joy and nourishment for the whole region. We got swings, and we've got built the development behind it. We knew it needed to be residential, and we thought an art gallery would be very nice. We got the developer to build the art gallery for it. And then we created this ethic where all of a sudden the community demanded access to the water's edge. It was a newfound important regional goal in our region, that public access, you got water. So we work with the Ports Authority. When this is getting redeveloped, there'll be public access along there. And then we were developing on the other sides of that tall building, and we're going to put an aquarium, you see in a minute, on one side, and a maritime center on the other. And I was very concerned that you would be able to walk in front of the tall building, and the owners of the tall building and the residents of the tall building did not want anybody walking in front of them, which I figured that would be just a rinky-dink city. You got some great public use on one side, another can't get. So I worked with the tall building people, but they didn't want to do it, and I knew I couldn't acquire by eminent domain. That would just be a little much, and so you just keep working, right? So luckily the bulkhead started caving in a little bit, so we worked out a deal with the owners of the building that we would rebuild the bulkhead and maintain it in perpetuity. Cost a couple of $1 million. And then we would close the walkway at 9:30 at night or whatever. You usually find a win-win. So we got the nice walkway, which gives us this uninterrupted connection along the water's edge, connecting one public access to the asset to the other, the aquarium, and where our International African American Museum is going to be built. Going to be one of the great treasures in America. But I don't have enough time to tell you about that today. And then on the other side of town, where there was no shoulder We created walkways. People from the region would come and enjoy it and tell me how wonderful it was. The thing is, they knew that their citizenship became more valuable. They didn't have to buy a ticket, join the club or anything, just living in the community. And then we needed a new ballpark, and we built it on the water, and a lot of controversy. Why you put it on the water? You get offer for cheap land on the edge of town. I said, no, cheap land, free land, cheap land, give something to citizens, put it on the nicest land. So we built the ballpark, and you know, the citizens love it. It's civic engagement. It's the baseball is almost incidental. You're in a public place, great time of year, with family and friends, building memories. That's why you build it. And then behind, you go to get a hot dog behind first base, and that's what you look at. It's like a observation deck at a waterfront park. Quickly, visiting is so important. We have a new bridge coming into the peninsula where no bridge existed before, connecting us with large parts of the suburban region. And so that new highway coming in to the main street in the city, Calhoun Street, the other end, the aquarium. And so preservation organization said, Joe, you got a plan for Calhoun Street. You have all this development pressure. I said, no, I don't. Oh, I felt so bad. So quickly we got neighborhoods together and the civic groups and the preservation groups and everybody and did a quick plan for Calhoun Street. And it should be a civic boulevard and all of that, certain uses you want, certain uses you don't want. So luckily we had the plan done just before, whoops, I think we dropped the slide here. Anyway, we got the plan done just before the friends of mine came for a plan for Max Sleep Inn on Calhoun Street, a cheap motel. And I said, Joe, this thing's going to make buckets of money. And I said, well, the plan says we don't want any motels along there. So I won by one vote, kept the motel out. The county was moving the library. We bought the land, gave it to them. So instead of a cheap motel, we got the library. Then across the street was a surface parking lot. School board was looking for a place to go, and they were going to move out. We got to deal with the school board. So we got the school board building and then the city on the top floor, our engineering and planning building. So you got a wonderful public building instead of a surface parking lot, across from the library instead of a cheap motel. And that's because the citizens demanded they have a right to set a vision for that street. And then still on that street, at the intersection of a Main Street, King Street, obviously was this hotel, and it of course had gone bankrupt. The Prudential owned it, foreclosed. And so we're trying to send the energy of King Street up, and that was an important corner. And so it was for sale, and the college wanted to buy it for a dorm. And dorms are a great thing, but if it was once a hotel and it becomes a dorm, it's a little messaging coming out to the building said this used to be a good location, it used to be a hotel, now the best thing they could do is a dorm. So I told the college they couldn't have it for a dorm. I didn't have the power to, but anyway, I told them they couldn't. And we worked with the developer, and we built the parking and put 108 tax credits and all the stuff in there. And but because we got the hotel, private sector owns it, it's making a lot of money now. But because we got the hotel the right use, this building became that. Across the street, this building became that. The whole block got restored. Blocks got restored because the right use, the right entity in that ecosystem, the restorative one, was built. And then across the street was a square that never had been loved. No one really ever felt quite safe there. It just didn't work. And we knew it was a great opportunity for wonderful public park. So we worked with great designers and transformed it into, I call it, it's like a public garden, but we got rid of the surface parking and put pedestrian streets in there and beautiful fountains and farmers market and craft fairs and shows, and it's just the most fun place to be. We all know how joyful farmers markets are, and people come from several counties every Saturday there, and the farmers from several counties. It's a wonderful regional asset. We light a Christmas tree, just before Christmas. Santa comes and turns it on. All the kids are there. Transformative public space. And Charleston is a small peninsula, and we always wanted tourists. We wanted tourists to come to see Rainbow Row, where preservation began, to see wonderful flowers when they're in bloom and all of that. And then they started coming not just in the spring, year-round. All of a sudden, people were complaining about too many tourists. So what we knew was that we needed a tourism management plan. And once we started working on it, it was so obvious. What you do is you have a duty to figure out how you want the visitors to use the city to your benefit. Simple as that. So we, any buses could go anywhere and whatever. We all these wonderful new rules put together with engagement of the industry and the citizens. And we needed a new visitor center. So we transformed these old railroad buildings into restored uses and visitor center, so people could come and begin their trip to Charleston, come to the visitor center. It really looked nice and made a nice bus depot for the buses, so feel good coming in. And then in the visitor center, we put a model of the city in the floor. So you're standing on the floor looking down at that. And the purpose was that you would understand that the city, the scale of the city was such you could walk around. So you wouldn't need your car. So instead of using your car, you park in one of our parking facilities and you get on the trolley. And there should be a picture of a trolley here, but we lost it. And so you get in a trolley vehicle, you park your car, and then you ride down the streets we want you to ride down. And so that, I figure we have saved so many marriages by doing that. What the thing is, rather than, honey, didn't you see it's a one-way street? But Bud got killed. I mean, this is awful. And no. You park your car and hold hands, and go get in the trolley, and then the trolley takes you down King Street. So look at that. Ooh, those are beautiful, whatever, the shoes at the stop and everything. So anyway, it's a very domestic accord achievement. And so let's say that, and I'm losing a couple of slides here, but it doesn't matter. What you would see, if you could see there, is a one-story building that is a liquor store. And it's a liquor store that is operated by friends of mine growing up. And it's, and I don't go there that often. And actually then I moved to a nicer building because we did a deal for them so we could redevelop it. But so one day I went into the liquor store to buy a modest purchase for a staff party I was having. And so the elected officials here understand this feeling. You come in and the clerks, start converging behind the counter when they see you come in, like, you're going to get some information. And so you just get a little nervous about that. And then in this liquor store, it's interesting in that they all wore pistols. And so they had, permit from the state somehow. And, it's hot in Charleston, so they don't have jackets on. So they got a holster and a pistol, right there. And so it, felt quite safe in there. And but anyway, Charleston's a very safe city. So I'm approaching those guys, they're converging. And so what did they want to tell me? So what we had was, great. Yeah, isn't that a beautiful liquor store? Yeah. So anyway, so I was in the liquor store, and what do these guys want to talk to me about? Well, we had this intersection that was all paved over, and a friend of mine sent me, we were digging a new water line down. He said, while you're all digging that up, why don't you plant some? So I sent the idea to my great parks department. So they came up with this plan. So instead of this, now you're going to see the beat up old street. Instead of that, we now got this. And so one of the guys said, Mayor, Joe, what y'all did down there at Broad and Raleigh? I said, yeah. He said, that's the prettiest thing I ever saw. Another guy leaning on his pistol said, Joe, you know where I live, don't you? And I said, yeah, I didn't, but he was leaning on his pistol. I don't know. And he said, I drive 2 miles out of the way going home, and I just drive by there and look at it. And another one said, that was a really nice big oak tree y'all transplanted there. And I said, well, we thought that'd be nice. And then they wanted to get into new flower beds we had just planted. And then they wanted to discuss architecture and the new development and how it was blending in with the city. Now, these guys selling liquor, wearing pistols, wanted to talk to the mayor about beauty. And so often I think we can be timid about these kinds of things, that maybe we get interested in them, but the public generally really doesn't care that much. And they care desperately. And we fail them every time we don't have the energy or the courage to do the work, to make places that they live more beautiful and appealing to them. So if the political support is there, what is the public policy imperative? And the public policy imperative is that every detail in a city is important. And when we were building a waterfront park, we had bluestone sidewalks brought in. We hadn't had bluestone since the 1800s because the city couldn't afford it. We got nice bluestone from wherever, someplace in New England. But when they put it down, I was so disappointed because I realized that they now use saws, not hand chisel, and it was cut so precisely, it just looked fake. So I told our building parks guy we had to do something. They came up with the idea of putting a torch around the edge of the bluestone, and then it rounds it, and it looks just right. And so the public policy, political support is there. The public policy imperative is that that little towns or big cities and regions, we hold those in trust for future generations. And we must treat them with great care so that what is passed on is more beautiful and more inspiring than we inherited. And then lastly, the moral imperative, because it helps when we get up in the morning and we attend to our work, whether it's a citizen or a mayor, that we feel the zeal of why it's essential. And the moral imperative is that a city should be a place where every citizen's heart can sing. Well, when we built the waterfront park, first phase was a little pier that was rebuilt while we were doing the rest of the park. And you see it's getting filled in up there. So we rebuilt this, which we didn't know what used to be there. It was just all these stones had kind of fallen into the mud. So the architect came up with this idea. Thought this was probably what it once looked like. And we had young children then. I knew there had to be a big rail around it. I said, "No, Joe, they don't need a rail around it. They're not going to fall in. Just do that, and people can, drape their legs over and just sit, and it'll be okay." I said, "All right." So we built it, and so I was jogging there one morning, sun up, and I saw a fella sitting just like they said someone would, drinking a cup of coffee, legs draped over, about sun up. And I knew him. I didn't disturb him. He was at peace. I was running. But I saw him a couple of weeks later, and his name was Clarence Hopkins. He had a speech impediment. He lived with his mother, rode a bicycle. He had 2 jobs, sweeping up in front of a gas station and then a shoe shine parlor thing at the barbershop. And he frequently had seizures, and people, in the commercial district knew how to take care of him so he wouldn't hurt himself. And I said, "Clarence, I saw you at the park the other morning." And he said, "Yeah." I said, "You go there often?" He said, "Yeah, I go every day." I said, "Really? Why?" He said, "Joe, it's so beautiful in the morning. The sun's coming up, and sometimes you see a ship coming in." I realized that in our cities and towns, many of us have options to take a lot of trips or vacation, whatever. But there's some people that all they have is what their town or city has. That's it. And they've never seen the Mississippi, haven't seen the Rocky Coast of Maine, or the sunset in the Pacific, or the Purple Mountain Majesties, or Appalachian Range. All they have is what they have in their city. when we were opening the park, which is about 2 years later when everything was finished, I looked for him because I wanted him to come to the opening. And we had a big ceremony, 5,000 people there, symphony playing, May, sunset, gorgeous night, beautiful. But I couldn't find Clarence. Found out he had had a stroke from which he never really recovered. But we got him to come, brought him there in the handicapped van and a wheelchair and all like that. And but I wanted him there because we'd worked on it for 15 years. These things take a long time, and I knew he would enjoy it. I didn't introduce him. No one really knew anything about him. His family just wondered why they thought it was odd I went to the trouble to give Clarence a front row seat of this and that. But I wanted him there for all of us, like you, who had raised money, given money, supported it. City officials worked on it. Because in seeing him, we were reminded why we did it and why it's important that we do those things. Why it's important that you're here right now. Because Clarence Hopkins, when he was healthy, he'd get on his bicycle and go down to a public park in his city and clothe himself with peace and beauty every day. And we work hard to make our towns and cities great places for the Clarence Hopkins who live among us. Then we'll make great and successful places for everyone. Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, thank you very much. Thank you. You're very... Thank you. That was so nice. And I know I've used all my time, so if there are questions, or there might not be time for them, that's the only reason I stood up here for a minute. But thank you for doing this, for y'all being here, and thank you for inviting me. It was an inspirational experience for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mayor, that was an inspiring speech you gave, and being a colleague of 20 years and doing what you're doing, I admire your tenacity to build communities. What I find here, I'm with the Memphis Area Association of Governments. We represent 6 counties in the region. And what I find often is the shortfall for many communities is what Charleston did, was to have a plan that really guided you in your decision making and really the fine points of what you've added to that plan. You want to speak a little bit on that?
Well, and I've got this hearing loss. Can anyone just make sure I understood that question?
The importance of having a plan to guide all of those details and to guide the individual actions. So can you speak to the importance of having a plan?
Yeah. You know, it's absolutely essential, and it's no different than a Memphis or Ole Miss or Tennessee football coach having a big game, and you got a game plan, and you give it a lot of thought, and you stick to it, and it's just essential, and that's often the hardest part, and then what you do is you've got a good plan, a strategic plan or a development plan, but just like that game plan, you keep looking at it, and has anything changed that maybe an adjustment would make it even better, and you just don't. It's not something you do with the scratch of the head or your gut any more than you would attend to any kind of responsibility like that. We had we worked with a group to create the Mayor's Institute for City Design, and Ed Loke, who was the great redevelopment official of his era, and he did it in New York and Boston and South Bronx and all that, and he would often, the mayor's institute, the first question he would ask the mayor after they presented is, what does your strategic plan say about this? And that's why it's just so valuable. And you have a good plan, and then that gives you confidence. If you're going about something that's hard, well, you've done the work, and we studied it, and, the plan, and this is what it says, and so you got to have it. It's essential.
Mayor Riley, I wanted to compliment you on your presentation. You made me laugh. You made me cry a little bit. That was very inspiring.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you a question. You mentioned restorative developments. The Mid-South is our economic development and our workforce development. We need some boost. So it's difficult to say no to a development. So I wanted to know, what was your metric or standard of measurement for what a restorative development is or would be?
Well, first of all, you've got good planning document and guidelines and principles, so that's a big help, because you certainly can't sit across the desk from a developer and say, I'm sorry, Joe, but we just don't like this. We don't think that's a good idea. So you got to have that planning document to say, what we have seen for this neighborhood in terms of scale or use or whatever, that's what you do, and you have to stick by your guns, and if you're wrong, and you've got city councils and the public can override, but that's what it is. That's and the thing is, it's always your friends. No one ever. I've never met anyone from the mafia, and I never had anybody try to bribe me. So it's always your friends come in with this great idea, And I had one good friend who came in. They wanted to do the max sleep in. These are guys who went to high school with. Another good friend that they were, knew that, and every city's different, but Market Street was delicate, and they had a plan for Hard Rock Cafe on Market Street. That wasn't Market Street. It might be someplace there. It wasn't Market Street. So you had to tell them no, but often it would help to say, well, let me tell you. So the thing is, what our, plan has said about Market Street is what we should be doing, and so that's why the planning work is so important. Because there are times when you have to look the gift horse in the mouth, and it's not easy to do. But if the plan, which was, commitment to excellence, and you work hard on it, and you got this, to make Germantown, or to make Memphis or Clarksdale or whatever it is, that we've done this work and we think the best thing, then it's easier to handle.
I had one question. If you could talk a little bit more about Waterfront Park. As you know, there's been lots of great studies that have been done of the Memphis riverfront, but for a host of reasons, nothing's really gotten a lot of traction. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the Waterfront Park planning, design, construction took about 10 years, is what I understand. Was there ever a point in that 10-year process where you felt like it just wasn't going to happen, that you had to overcome a major obstacle?
Sure, and it might have been 13 years, it might have been 15, but there were several. We had lots of hurdles, funding, and some people thought it was not wise. So that's in this business. You're going to have those hurdles, and so you just if you've done the work. And what I would always do when we're going through something difficult, and Charleston Place, the Waterfront Park, the aquarium, and many others, the museum, African American Museum I'm working on now, you should often be looking, say, Joe, or with the team, we're confident this is right. So you go back to it with some thoughtful reanalysis, and then, it really is the right thing. Then then, you know, it's like anything in life, you just don't quit. And, you know, you gotta be creative, and it's just, you know, it's like a football game. You get knocked down, you get back up. You get knocked down, you get back up again. You know, you hit them harder the next time. And so that's what you don't quit. And sometimes, you know, in a city, sometimes something really hard and worthwhile takes a generation. It's okay. Don't, you know, I think we expect, because we have the ability kind of structurally to build big things fast. But that doesn't mean that important things in a city are going to happen fast. It's better that they take a while, and you're shooting for and eventually achieve something of excellence, than you get the speed that a lot of people would like and end up with something that doesn't do justice to the town or city. Thank you all so much.